Welcome to Laid Off and Looking. It's a podcast where friends and journalists, Jenna and Dom, we're looking to create a community for anyone who's been laid off, especially journalists, and also analyzing this wildly changing media landscape.
All right, well, we have started. So, Dominic, here we are together for another week of Laid Off and Looking.
Yeah, week two. Can't believe we
Exactly.
did it.
Well, okay, so so much housekeeping stuff, but and at least in terms of like us figuring out stuff to work, I'm still trying to figure out my audio situation. And I will say that I probably need to be in a more studio situation. My office is kind of like a loft in my house, but I don't know. I haven't been back in my studio since it was dismantled from the last gig, so it's a little bit of a trauma source to go back in there.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to also trying to set up my little situation here, my little nook in my studio apartment, and trying to hopefully sound as decent as possible. Do my best.
I think you sound great. But
Thank
then
you.
again, I've got on the headphones.
Yeah,
So let's just dive right into everything
right.
because this feels like this has been an exceptionally long week. So first and foremost, how are you doing?
As I like to, I think it's my usual, I'm hanging in there, there's just been a lot of, I think, anxiety after seeing from last week till this week, the news of many of the layoffs happening across journalism and media. There's been a lot going on, even up till today.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
how
Well,
about you, Jen?
yeah, I was gonna say for me, the easiest way to put it is dysregulated. Like I feel dysregulated. I've had my emotions have been like this, and sometimes it's in the span of 24 hours. Sometimes it's in the span of an afternoon. Sometimes it's in the span of an
Hmm.
hour. I've had like inspirational highs and soul sucking lows, and it's just been like this insane roller coaster of emotions.
I feel you. Same thing. We touch base throughout the weekend. I know there are times we have great days and we're pumped up and we're ready to go. And then there are days where you look at everything on social and you're like, oh my goodness,
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
going on?
What is going on, and more importantly, what is happening to this thing I dedicated my life to? So very quickly, just in case anybody, although I can't imagine anybody who hasn't listened to us doesn't know this, but basically the layoffs are LA Times lost like 20% of their staff. Time Magazine lost like 15% of their staff. Pitchfork Media is pretty much a done data. Sports Illustrated, done data. National Geographic and Business Insider both laid off like in the neighborhood of 10-ish%. I think it's like 8 or so. NBC had layoffs. Then there were strikes at the Daily News, Condé Nast, Forbes, Washington Post. Like, I mean, just, I know I said this last week, but it just feels like you're standing on quicksand.
Well, and right before we started, I sent you that note about how the Messenger this week just also folded that new digital journalist company, and they
Yeah.
were started months ago, and they just ended up folding. And I think over 300 jobs, if I'm right, are they're that are out, and it's there. It just seems never ending. It seems never ending.
That's so true. In fact, that's part of what, so in addition to all the other stuff that happened, there's of course the whole like Elmo on Twitter thing where Elmo tweets out like, "Hey, Elmo wants to know how's everyone doing?" And people just trauma dumped on this poor little Muppet. And I mean, listen, on one hand, like I get it, don't ask a question you don't really want the answer to. But at the same time, yeah, like I mean, I don't know, for me it was somewhat comforting, even though it was really disconcerting that like, oh my God, a lot of people are also down bad, but then also like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
ah,
Elmo, I've got some news for you.
which is weird because when we met Elmo, he was
Yep.
totally different person.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Different
that
time.
was, yeah, I know that was a completely different time. Well, so one of the things that I did want to highlight was speaking of the way that New York Magazine put it, the media apocalypse. So I found the article goes out, and this is after, like, all of those layoffs and like downsizing, all this other stuff that I just mentioned. And so I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but features writer Sean McCreesh wrote this article about the media apocalypse. Condé Nast and other publishers stare into the abyss. And so I found it on Instagram, and the Instagram post, this is what really caught my attention, was it summarized the whole thing this way. It has dawned on journalists that journalism might all but cease to exist in the near future. And whatever form it takes is being shaped by executives who have no clear idea how to create a sustainable business. And then it goes on, quoting a Vanity Fair correspondent, and I'm essentially paraphrasing here, that without a master plan or a vision to keep the business afloat, besides budget cuts, everyone has been making do with nothing for years. So for this to happen, it's like things might just come apart from here. And that just it encapsulates how I've been feeling.
I also thought it would later, towards the end of the article, I believe there's a quote from Anna Wintour, a source close to Anna
Mhm.
Wintour, that I think it's beyond her job to fix this, because obviously she's the head of the company, and then was saying her job to fix this. We don't see how it's going to be fixed. And I think that's the thing. It's a lot, even people with the heads of these companies don't know how to, it's like we're at a phase right now where it's like, I don't think people know exactly how to fix this. Um, and that can leave you feeling a certain way on our end, being the journalists out here who are covering the stories, or the people who are out there trying, it tries to try to figure out, like, what how does this get fixed, Jenna?
Oh my God. I legit, I don't know. And I don't know how um, less journalism is good for a healthy democracy in any way, shape, or form. And again, I do think that this is now like, the health of our country. I mean, we even talk to people about this, about the death of local journalism and how incredibly important that is for anything to function, really, that you have to have, yeah, a healthy democracy, and that doesn't seem to be where we are right now.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, just the other thing that I've been processing is, I guess, the feeling of being laid off, because that's one of the things that I've noticed for myself, even when I'm sort of talking like to you on the phone or to somebody else. Like, I'll be talking about, ideas, whatever, and it's no big deal. But when I get to the part where I have to address that, like, but I don't have a job, I find myself like almost whispering that or something. And it's weird. There's like this, I don't know, I almost want to say like a sense of shame around not working, even though, again, it had nothing to do with us or the quality of the work that we were doing. But there's this weird shame, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Is that just me or do you feel anything like that?
It's scary. For me, it's scary. The shame part is there, but it's also scary, because you kind of feel you don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel right now.
Hmm.
And with all these layoffs happening, it can, and it's also wanting to do work that you feel you're also compensated for it fairly. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's the other
No,
side of,
totally, totally.
you just don't know where this leads. So yeah, I guess that's sort of, it's scared, it's, frustrated, it's feeling uh yeah.
Well,
And
it's weird because there's this, I guess, sort of like back and forth. I don't really know, but two schools of thought about how to handle this, because one school of thought says, definitely immediately let people know, like, so, if anybody hears anything, they can, recommend you or something like that. Da, 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 da. And then there's this other school of thought of like, yeah, you can let people know, but you don't need to broadcast it. And by that, I mean, okay, so I know that you're not I know you're on LinkedIn, but you're probably not on it as much as I am, which presents its own emotional traumas for me. But do you or do you not post the green open to work banner on your profile? Because no, because some people who've been laid off, like I had it and then I removed it. But and I've noticed that some people never put it on their profile. Some people have it and left it up. Some people, and people, I guess, interact or can interpret it in different ways.
I had dinner with a couple of friends this week, and we were discussing the open to work banner. And that was something that for me, and it was shared by one of my other friends, it was the fact that I feel a certain way about it, and
Hmm.
I'm sure if it works for people, that's great. If people think that for me, I do feel it can seem a little people could take it as feeling desperate. For hirers can look at it as feeling a sense of desperation from the worker. And I mean, to be real, sometimes someone could say, well, listen, I want a job. But I think that could also, in some instances, it could work against people. There's nothing wrong with being able to, I am looking for work. Obviously, we're doing this podcast. It's out there, but I do think in particular with LinkedIn, just like some social media, things can be perceived a certain way, and I'm a little protective of that. So I didn't put the green banner up, and I'm
And
cautious
for
about
the
how.
record, I don't know what the answer is either, but I've heard like it was recommended to me that like no, you should probably take that down. And I was like, wait, what?
Mhm. Think again, it's a personal thing that people have to figure out for themselves. It's all about your comfort level. I
Okay, so
just.
this is one of the things about the figure out for yourself part that I think is starting to get to me is that so when you're working in a team together, there's sort of like a collective that you're working with, you're all working towards one goal. But once and we've discussed this, once you're laid off or you're no longer working for a place, you're kind of out here floating on your own and like you don't really have that
Mhm.
team or that sense of community to help think through stuff. So you're just kind of like, I don't know, maybe this, I don't know, maybe that. Which of course leads to second guessing, which leads to undermining your own thoughts. Like,
Oh, hello again, doing this podcast. I mean, we go back and forth even discussing even in my head as I'm answering a question, I will analyze and think of how am I answering this? How do I sound? I mean, you want to be truly authentic, but you also want people to, I think you think about how you are presenting yourself to people who are looking at you or, you know,
well,
talking to
I
you.
I just so you know, my secret sauce to broadcasting is to pretend nobody's watching. I'm not kidding. Most of the broadcasting that I've done, I just assume nobody's listening or nobody's watching, and then it all melts away. That's just my secret sauce.
Yeah. I mean, I do think of how people watch us and again, thinking in terms of looking for work, how do people perceive you? And that's definitely how I think that happens on whether it's LinkedIn and, a lot of it is about perception. And again, it just makes you,
It's making me paranoid. Like I
I think,
can't second guess every single thing that I do because one person who might be hiring might interpret it the wrong way.
right.
Like I don't think I can live like that either.
And as you were saying before, when you work as a collective, it's different because it's not just all on you. But right now, the way things are going, you could see the market is becoming very much it's you. And partly of what we were discussing before, this whole issue of branding and, how do you present yourself? How do you market yourself as an individual? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I think a lot of us are, and I can only say for somebody who as a producer who's behind the scenes, it's a very different way of looking at yourself. Because you do kind of have to, yes, people have websites and they put things together, but it still feels different now compared to maybe like 10, 15 years ago, or even a few years ago, actually.
A few
And
months ago.
well, you as a host, I mean, I'm so curious, Jenna, like for yourself, how do you feel about the issue of branding And because you are somebody who's been on the face of television, you and on a
I've been
show,
on the radio, I've done, yeah.
radio. How do you feel?
Um, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, here's the thing. There's a part of me that I guess low key resents it, and here's why. Um, I associate branding with like, you know, packaging, with like an inanimate object, with like a commodity. And I'm a person, I'm not those things. And so the idea that I have to take, you know, these different things that I've done with my career. And by the way, like, I mean, my career, it's not like I've just been a healthcare journalist or something like that. Like, I've done general assignment, I've done state or politics, I've done community, I've done culture. Like, well, that's the other thing, is that I literally do not know. I don't know what the brand is. I want to work, and if you hire me, I'll do a good job. Like, I don't. I literally, I don't. I don't know what the brand is, and then on top of that, because it's not, once you have the brand, well, now you got to market it. And I don't like. That's one of the things where I'm like, I don't know how to market myself really, which, if you're going to be a freelancer, which I've never really been comfortable in. I found myself having to do it, but I've never really been comfortable because I've never quite grasped how to do that. And yet, I mean, if you want to eat, you got to figure out how to market yourself. And I don't know. Like, I'm not an influencer. I never wanted to be an influencer. I wanted to be a journalist and the work to be the star. Not me, but I'm just lost.
I think that, I've been on the freelancing side of things, but it always, for the most part, um, fell into this space of people I knew were the ones who would hire me, friends. It's just it's your network. And
Mhm.
that's different for me. Like, I understand that, you work, your friends know you're available, or people know you that you work with here you're available. But, again, when you see the market squeeze this, like as it is right now, and you see that there are so few jobs, and there are thousands of people applying for hundreds, or even thousands of people applying for a single job, as opposed to what it was like just a few years ago. um, it starts making you just, yeah, it's a lot. And I think that's the whole thing, is about trying to set yourself apart. The brand idea of branding is just, again, very new for me in terms of who I am. I sort of feel like it's trying to pull your personality out a little bit more. And
But not
that's
everything about
different.
my personality is should be. Okay, so here's a perfect example. I apparently have committed one of the cardinal sins of journalism. I suck at Twitter. And part of the reason why I suck at Twitter, aside from the fact that I'm convinced that platform is a hellscape, is that I don't believe that every single thought that crosses my mind belongs on the internet. And even thoughts that I have, about stories, because again, my knee jerk reaction is that um you're not really supposed to know my opinion about stuff, but then apparently that is what we're doing. And so it's not like, that's one of the things that, like, I just, wait a second, what did we all decide to do the opposite of what I thought we were doing? And I'm fine. There's so many journalists who I follow who engage with, again, I'm talking about Twitter, but who engage with the platform that way. And I think it's great. Like, my God, they're genius, they're witty, they're smart, they're all this other stuff. But I'm like, I, I don't know. There's just not. So I guess I say that because in my social media scrolling, and by the way, I feel like I do much better, not that I'm like great, but I do better on the more visual platforms, which is probably why I'm not a writer in the first place. But so I was scrolling on TikTok and I came across this video from some Washington Post, I think she was technology reporter. I think her name is Taylor Lorenz, I don't know what her name is. Anyway, the point is that she posted about, the free fall that journalism is in, and how, she didn't really come, she wasn't trained as a journalist. She sort of fell into it because she was a blogger about technology. And then the Washington Post was like, hey, you already have a built in audience. Why don't you come work for us? Which again has not been my story. But what got me was that at one point she said, I think there's a ton of really talented journalists who are also not great social media people. And I was like, that is me. Like, I am her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like you said, a lot of journalism coming up, you were told for the most part is like you said before to keep your opinion to yourself and also not to share so much. On especially when, Facebook and Twitter were starting and out, and as it's moved on in years, people have become much more comfortable posting certain types of stories, but still again keeping most things private, but it's really changed over the past few years. And I think that's where for you know this, Jenna, like I feel a certain way. I've always felt it's just my personality. It isn't just the what I was told. I was like, I grew up in a family where you did keep certain things private. And so it's for me, there's a lot of it is about sort of pushing out of one's comfort zone and trying these new things and trying to put myself out there more. I don't know though if that means I want to do it as much as certain other people do it, but I think it's within my own. I guess I'm trying to figure out my own comfort levels with it. And I guess that's kind of like what you're saying too, is like, how much do we really want to put ourselves out there? And if there's a feeling of this is what you need to be doing, like, yes, I have no
Dude,
problem.
putting yourself out there by the by.
Yeah.
So just no, because this video that I see, like from this journalist, this Taylor girl, I see like tens of thousands of likes, etc.
Mhm.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, let me at least go take a look at her bio. Let me see what's going on. Dominic, she has a footprint on, stay with me here. Substack, YouTube, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, LinkedIn, Mastodon, Tumblr, Twitch, website, Twitter, post. Like, I was like, wait, hold on, wait a second. Like, is this what we're doing?
She that's her role though. I know she's really
This is just one example, but again, when I think of like branding and stuff, like, does it need to be everywhere? Like, what? It just, oh, I
that's
felt the whole thing felt very overwhelming.
I think that's where again we have to I wonder, I guess that's my thing. I wonder if people expect everyone to be as active as that. And I guess I'm hoping not, because I think that would be really difficult for all of us because our jobs are also different and not all of us can be that active on all the different platforms. So but even the few of them, I mean, again, it's a lot, putting this podcast together, and us discussing putting these things and getting it out there. That's a lot. And on top of being able to sort of so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wonder if that's what's expected of everybody, or if it's just a select few that it kind of then falls on us that we feel a certain way because we see people doing that and we're like, wait a minute, is this what we're supposed to be doing?
Well, so one of the other things that I have noticed from like, especially from the journalists that I follow that are, well, first of all, still working,
Mm.
but also, who I admire. Um, there's always been a part of me that's worried that we live in a follower economy, meaning that, like, if you don't have 10,000 followers, what are you doing? And like, that's the other thing that, like, I have a few thousand here or there, but again, like, oh my God. Anyway, and if you haven't amassed that many followers, then are you really a good journalist? Do you actually have anything worthwhile to say? Because maybe that's why nobody follows you because you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
ugh.
It feeds into all these different various, I mean, well, I guess like if we're talking about the branding part, like obviously I know for me, like it's something that I do want to do is building up how how one presents oneself in terms of um in our brand, our audience. I guess for me, like, how have you been thinking about it more? And if you are, how are you thinking of trying to build?
Well, okay, there's so many angles to it because first of all, I'm still also just trying to like aggregate or like get my hands on, wrap my head around the body of work that I've amassed over the past like 20 years. And but then at the same time, then I start thinking I'm just like, oh man, 20 years. I should probably take my graduation date off my resume. like, like so like I don't know. I don't know. I still don't know. Like, I mean, I know that, you know, I know that spaces that I feel very, very comfortable in, so comfortable that the work doesn't feel like work. Like, for example, doing this, I know that you are stepping way outside of your comfort zone. Um, I could not give a not that sounds terrible. I couldn't give. I mean, this doesn't phase me. This doesn't feel like, anxiety inducing work. Like even if I were um I mentioned in a TikTok reel video that I did like Nassau County property taxes. If I was engaging in a conversation about that, it would still feel quite natural and easy for me. Even though, I would have had to have done a lot of back research because I don't live on Long Island, but that still would have been there. Um so yeah, like stuff like that and like, and panel moderating and reporting, my god, I miss reporting so bad. I really do. Going back over some of the stuff that we did, I miss reporting, field reporting so much. Yeah. Well, okay, so I know that I am completely stumped when it comes to branding, but um and you sort of touched on it, but if you were I don't know, like if you were to engage like in a branding exercise or brand your body of work or like your career, have you given that any thought to what that would look like or be or
I I don't know if this is gonna how I mean, I think a big part for me has always been storyteller,
Mhm.
somebody who likes to tell other people's personal stories. I think some of
I
the creative
absolutely love that.
I mean, we obviously we covered a lot of sometimes we cover a lot of breaking news stories, but I always did really enjoy talking to people and hearing from them. And whether, I know for me there were a few field pieces that I did, and it was like, one was roller derby, which seemed like such a,
Oh, I
you know
didn't get to go on that one.
I know I worked Steve Thompson and we went on that one, and we followed this all-female roller derby team. And it was, I mean, again, you talk to people and then also we worked on the um Marsha's house, and where we talked about homelessness in the queer community. And that was something, being able to hear from a personal story of someone who was leaving Marsha's house to go finally live on their own, and what that was like. So I liked hearing the diversity of all the different stories that, I was able. So that's why I love hearing people's stories and talking to them. That's partly me. I'm a I'm a talker.
No, listen, I'm a talker, but more importantly, I would say I'm a listener
No, this
because
is
what I
great.
found over my career is that everybody has a story to tell, and B, if you give somebody the space and the safety to tell their story,
Mhm.
and there's nothing like that feeling than like when you get a guest to trust you enough to genuinely open up and share their story with you. Like I can't describe what that feeling is like, but it's that in and of itself is always a win for me.
1,000% correct. I think that's an important part. You're right. I think a lot of people sometimes miss that part out, which is the listening. You ask the questions, but you're listening to sort of hear where people are going with their story. So I think that's an important part of
Oh,
to
that's
bring.
that's part of the reason why. I mean, some of the producers from the show like didn't mind, others I think it drove them crazy. But yeah, I would frequently veer off because somebody I might have a guest who says something that's just so like, wait a second, wait, wait. We're not just gonna gloss past like you didn't just say that. And I'd go down, like tell me a little bit more about this thing. But again, you're also doing that with a time constraint in mind. Like we didn't have all the time in the world for me to go down every single rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
yeah, a conversation rarely ever follows a predetermined script. And if it does, at least to my ear, I can always tell like it has a very stilted feel to it.
Yeah, no, I think and I think that definitely, I mean, I guess for yourself though, how about you? How would you brand yourself in that way?
I mean, it's weird, God, because I had to like, pick your search SEO words for LinkedIn. So yes, storyteller, um, and I mean that's really where my passion is. I absolutely love that part of it. Um, Journalist, because it's not necessarily just like, my own made up. First of all, it's not made up stories. Like
Mhm.
if I,
Yes.
am with somebody or something, or you tell me a story, I can, or I witness it, I can tell that story like nobody's business, but like, "Jenna, sit down and make up a story." I
Yeah.
don't know. But I saw this other thing happen the other day. Like, I'm much better at that. Um, I don't know, like, I mean, I have producer on there because that has been part of my journey, um, to hosting and broadcasting, and, producing is definitely something that I can do. It's something I'm very comfortable with. Obviously, I've kind of gone back to it with this podcast situation, but, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Can you like Jenna Flanagan, storyteller, and then is that enough? I don't know. I do not know. Nobody's hiring for like we're looking for a storyteller.
No, it's Malta. It's really what we do also. It's like you said, it's storyteller, but it's also it is also being a producer. It is also being able to do the jobs of all of these different types of, I mean, I also see myself as having done these stories, you are a bit of a documentarian because you are looking to tell a
Oh, that's a
story of
good word.
because I think it isn't, I mean, this, a lot of the pieces we did were not like 2 minute pieces. They were like sometimes 15 minutes, a half hour. So it really depends on what you're presenting. I think there's lots of things. It's the fact also being creative, in terms of how we write and how we present the story. There's lots of different things. So I think
Oh, there's totally creativity in how you tell the story. I mean, again, I shouldn't rag on Long Island this way, but I remember and this was early on in my career where I had to write copy about like, I don't know, some changes in Nassau County property taxes. And I'll never forget it because the anchor, this is at a different station I was working at, but the anchor who read it came out and they were like, "Oh, Jenna, that was succinct and I actually cared." And I was like, wow, man. um, I won't say which stories, but I will say that I think that I have done a fairly good job on stories I genuinely do not care about. like, I mean, I'm sure every journalist has that, but subjects were like, yeah, I'm not feeling this. I don't really care. And to still give the story the dignity that it deserves, even if you don't care, I think is also super important.
Well, I think we try to be curious. We are curious about so many different topics and so many different stories, and some connect to us more than others. But like you said,
Also true.
we always put out even if there were certain that we were just like, okay, not my cup of tea, but I get it. People care about this story,
Yes, and that's what I would
and people
always
care
try to
about.
bring to it is that I may not care. Like I don't own a house on Long Island, but for people who do, they care a lot. I don't care, but I that someone else really does. And so for
Um,
that reason alone, the story deserves its dignity.
Some people may not care about what happened on Vanderpump Rules or Housewives of Salt Lake City, but I do. And that's what I'm
Exactly.
going to talk about, which we never covered, which I'm so sad about.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, is it possible to do that without stepping on Andy's toes? I don't even want to say his whole name. I don't want anybody. I mean, listen, he's never going to hear this podcast, but I do
No.
not want to create any situation where we are we are targets of ire.
Yes, no targets of ire here. No, I just think there's lots of interest that we do have and some that didn't even fit in what we would want to cover, that we would be able to cover on our shows. But that's what I mean. Like it's all relative. And I think it's as journalists, you are able to put certain parts aside for the most part and still give the story the fairness it deserves and to hear the voices. And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, going back to just how we see journalism changing or media changing. I know that that's a concern because again, we touched on this last week briefly, just how people with less voices, less stories are being told. And that to me is what's always so scary, is that there will be stories out there that will not be heard, whether it's in journalism or whether it's in the media landscape. And I know I believe it was either earlier in the week or late last week, Issa Rae was interviewed on Porter,
Hmm.
uh, and she brought up the whole issue of um, looking at the landscape and how much content in terms of Black shows that are being canceled, and basically saying going the route of more independent. That would be something like, because and I think that's the same thing with journalism that we've seen, where journalists have just become more independent and being like, well, if there's a risk that I will get fired, then I'm just going to have to go out there and start creating my own. I just do wonder how much of that, it's a little bit different in that sense of creating a production company, maybe, and producing content, than it is for some journalists, because I don't know. Yes, we've talked about Substack and we've talked about, Medium, and there's
By the
those.
way, I have a Substack, shameless plug.
I
You can follow
know,
me.
I know. Guess who's
I'll put the
following
link in
you?
the show notes.
Guess who's following you? But I mean, but you do, I guess for me, that's the only thing I start to wonder. Whereas I think, and listen, you doing that, and even us talking about this, we talked about this before too, about like it inspired me to be like, okay, now it's important for me to also push myself in different directions too, and look at, you know, extending ways to put my voice out there and tell stories. And I think that's great. But I do want, how is it changing? That's where it becomes a concern to me. Like, where does this go? Because there are so many independent voices out there that I think, I guess people have to search for it. And maybe we're just
Well,
gonna
I
get,
feel like doesn't everything, I mean, doesn't like, yes, people can come across things organically. That I will say that's one of the things that I do love about TikTok is that in my mindless scrolling, I still come across like, creators who have something interesting, something funny, or actually very smart and like researched. Like, I try to follow the creators who come with receipts for their work. Although I will say that this is a side note that a lot of them did point out that the stuff that the content they create, yeah, they're relying on journalism. And with less of that, there's less reliable content for them to create around. So there's just part of the ripple effects. But so, yes, I know that people can discover things organically, but um, still, even if the platforms aren't as big as they used to be, I still think that they kind of rule the day. Like, otherwise, it just gets too scattered. Like, there's the same way there's like a zillion different, streaming services, or, like too many cable chat. Like, I don't know. If everybody's their own little media entity, then how do you coalesce anything? That's what I don't get. Also, I would love to talk to somebody who can explain how exactly you get a production company up off the ground. Because I mean, you need like funding for that. Like, here's one thing that I will not do. having been a freelancer. I'm not exploiting anybody else.
Right.
So if I can't pay you, then I'm not going to do it, which is a whole nother conversation we should have, but that'll
Yeah.
be another show.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like how does that work even?
Yeah. I don't know.
Especially if you don't know any venture capitalists.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any venture capitalists in my phone, so I don't know how that gets off the ground. I know it can be done, but I don't know how that gets off the ground.
Yeah, there's a lot. Again, there's just a lot to how it's changing, and I guess really trying to figure it out and for oneself, and that can be overwhelming too because it just seems like there's so much going on, and there's so much to do,
Mhm.
um, and time feels like it slips by really quickly. And next thing you know, it's like another month passes. I mean, for us, it was from December, and it's already now the end of January.
I
Um,
know.
I
I
mean, by the
know.
time we post this, it's the beginning of February, but still, I mean, it's a lot. And I think that we're all just trying. I'm very curious to hear how others are dealing with these stories and how they're dealing with the stress from their jobs and being unemployed and how they're dealing with everything.
Of
Um,
course. Here's one other thing though, going back to the branding thing, because I remember initially when we first got word, and you know, my my nervous system deregulation officially began, and a friend of mine was just like, "Listen, was being very empathetic, but was trying to remind me, keep in mind, Jenna, you are not your job. So, like, if you end up doing something else in the, I don't know, short-term temper, whatever, like if you end up leaving the business was his point, that's okay because you are not your job. Um, but I guess I bring that up because how do you balance that while also simultaneously packaging yourself as attached to a job? And how do you do that in a career that demands so much of you? It's like we were saying, like when you do, a part of you gets put into every story that you write, every interview that you do. Like, how do you maintain that wall, I guess? I'm not looking for you to ask a question. I'm just putting
yeah,
it out there.
because I was gonna say,
I can see the
I
look on your face. You were like, Jenna, girl, I don't know.
don't have the answer.
I'm just saying that, like, I get like you are not your job, and maybe I would be able to like completely detached more if my job were just a paycheck, let's say. But and don't get me wrong, paycheck hugely important, very
Mhm.
much in the market for another paycheck.
Right.
But um for me the work has never been just about the money. Again, I wouldn't have worked in public media as long as I did if it was just about the money. Like
Yeah.
that's not where you go. It was never just about that. Like you know, there was the mission and the work that you got to do and the stories that you tell, etc. Like I believed in the work. So how do you separate yourself from that for the sake of the market or for the sake of your own sanity, let alone the marketplace, but your own
Mhm.
sanity?
No.
Have you considered that, I guess?
About how to separate, I don't know. I mean, honestly, it's so difficult to.
Do you think that's also a function of our age? I mean, we're roughly the same age. And I feel like millennials definitely Gen Z, like, but for people our age, like, I feel like your self-definition and your job kind of go hand in hand.
Yes, I do actually. I think you kind of, I think that was definitely something that I grew up with. And you know what I mean? In terms of it going hand in hand, because you put so much of yourself into your job and
Mhm.
enhancing it that it does become an extension of you in so many ways. But I don't know. I think that's partly, again, trying to diversify yourself kind of makes it interesting in a way of how you can extend yourself in different ways. Doing this job right now, doing this podcast and doing these other things that we're talking about. I think that kind of is really interesting in a way of how moving into the next job when we do get hired, um, is the
Thank you
fact
for saying that. Adding
that
the when. No, seriously, I need to remind myself every so often. Thank you for adding the when.
and we've talked about when we do, we still want to continue this because the show, because the the sense is obviously it's there's still all of us are in the same place. And jobs obviously it's very different right now. And I don't think it's ever going to go back to the way the security maybe that we all felt at a certain point. I
Well, the
think
security that I thought I saw going into the business is not where it is now.
it isn't, and I don't know if it's been that way for a while. I think, we were lucky enough to be in a environment where we did have that, but I
Yes.
shifted. And I
Well,
think that
speaking of that, I just want to say, because when I was going back and thinking about stuff for this episode, I remembered, and this was like, oh my God, this is like 15 years ago. Frontline did a show, they did a series of shows called News Wars. And it was, wait, hold on, because I wrote something down about it because it kind of left me shook. Okay. So Frontline did a four-part series called News War. What's happening to the news? And I remember how chilling it was watching that. Because, of course, first of all, Frontline tends to be like doom and gloom anyway, but it was super chilling. And the only way that I guess I could move on after having watched that was to be like, well, that won't happen to me, which is obviously completely ridiculous. But just, I went and I found one of the links for it because, of course, it's still online. And it's the series examined the political, cultural, legal, and economic forces challenging the news media today and how the press has reacted. Yeah. And to add even more, pour more salt in the wound, they even have a whole search term on their website called
right.
journalism under threat. And again, this was from 2007. So it's not like we weren't warned.
No, it's been bubbling for a while. And I think that it just now it's sort of yeah, it's just sort of exploded in a way. It's just all out there. And um again, I don't know, there's nothing that you can contain. You can't go back.
No.
And trying to it's basic gotten to the point now. It's like, so what do you do? And I think that's what we're trying to figure out is what, because if we had the answers, it'd be like, oh great, here everybody. But we're trying to figure that part out too, other than just being also um being willing to try new things, being willing to do things that are uncomfortable, that stretch you out of your what you feel like, oh, I could never see myself doing that, or oh, I don't know if I'd want. It's doing things that might not always feel instinctual in a way. And but at the same point, realizing as journalists, we have so many, and journalists and producers, we have so many actually life skills that can translate into different fields and different jobs. It's all how you want to look at it. I mean, there were so many people who say, you could drop a producer or anybody anywhere and you could really, I mean, we're people who can figure things out, the way our minds work, the way that we look at different things. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful in that way as much as this
Oh,
all, I know.
no, I love that. I absolutely love that. Like, I'm hopeful. I want to be hopeful. I know that's not, let me correct myself.
You're
That's
hopeful,
not
Jenna.
true. I
No.
am hopeful. Um, okay. I am hopeful, but I do have a fear voice in my head
So,
that, is just sometimes louder than
yes,
it should be.
yes.
Um,
Yes. But I think that's the thing though, right? We're hopeful because we know the types of people that we are. I mean, we know the industry we work in, we know, and I'm talking about just even us personally, like I know our work and the kind of people we are. We know how to hustle and to really get things done. And
yeah.
but at the same point, yeah, it's scary. And it can be overwhelming. And that's why sometimes too, even on social, sometimes I get a little overwhelmed with people, I know the market's bad, but it can also hearing everybody tell me it. It's like people,
Yeah, I get it's bad.
I get it. I know. And then everybody wants to either tell me how, oh, just do this, this, and this, and you'll get a job. And it's like, I've tried that. It doesn't, it hasn't worked. And I know,
My favorite is, well, you should have made yourself unfireable. And I'm like, girl, that ain't it either. Okay. That's not a thing.
no, it isn't. So, I mean, I think we're all getting to this point where, again, nobody has there isn't an easy answer. And it can be a little, that's the part that we're trying to all figure out. And what we're trying to do is figure it out is like how, and trying to do things outside of the comfort zone that still relates to your field. And maybe it takes you in a different direction too, that we never thought before. And I hope other people are thinking of that too.
I
Didn't
guess.
we talked about this yesterday, and I wanted you bring this up because you were saying that there's one thing that we should do for next week, which I really love this whole idea.
Oh, yes. I was saying that we should be accountability partners.
I like that. I love
Like,
this.
and isn't, wait a second, don't they do that with like, I don't know, oh, purity accountability partners or something? I'm not suggesting that by
What-
any stretch of the imagination.
I don't know what that is, and I don't want to
Oh
know.
my God. Okay. Total side note, but I think the current Speaker of the House and his so-called adopted black son are supposed to be like purity accountability. It's whatever. Anyway, I was just suggesting
Yes.
that for each other, that we come up with some sort of like, okay, here's a thing, a small chewable thing. Cause I've at least found so far that if I take all of this stuff that needs to get done and I take it in, bite-sized, chewable pieces, I can handle it. But as long as it's this huge wall of like, you need to do this yesterday coming at me, I just get overwhelmed and then just shut
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
Although in a newsroom setting, I don't do that. Just want to put that out there. Anyway, so on the offhand chance that somebody hears this.
Yes.
So my point is that I was thinking that we could yeah, somehow be like accountability partners. Like, okay, so I know that I've got all this stuff to do. I've been thinking about it. I definitely aside from putting out the podcast, duh, um I want to I had an idea for another Substack article. Um for the people who followed me, first of all, thank you so much. Really, very blessings. But welcome into my mind, basically. Like, this isn't going to be just like news articles. So I definitely want to put that together. And then, secondly, because it is Black History Month, and I have several pieces that I have done celebrating not just my own personal history and culture, but Black history and Black culture. I would like to aggregate, make sure that I have as much of that stuff ready that I can reshare in the best way possible. Because there's quite a bit of content that I have that, otherwise would just sit there.
Definitely. That's great. That's great. I think
Although that's a month-long goal. Like the Substack, that's what I'm gonna have done for next week.
I think I told you this last night when we were talking about this. I'm like, I have some ideas in my head, and I'm one of those people, I keep things. I used to always share everything, and then I would get frustrated because if it didn't come through, people would be like, well, so what's going on with that? So what's going on with that? And it was like, oh no. So I'm like, but I have some ideas, and I promised you, I'm like, I'm definitely doing something, but
Okay.
hopefully it's something by when we tape next week that I'll be sharing with everybody too. And that'd be fun to like, so hold myself accountable to not just you, but to whoever, all our
The
followers.
three people, yes, all of our followers,
All
all
of our
three people,
followers who are going to be.
one of whom you swore was international.
Yes. Oh no, I forgot to tell her.
Oh my
So
God. Okay, so our two followers.
my sister loves the show. we had some people from our former coworkers who listened, so maybe some of them will re-listen to the future episodes.
We're gonna find out. Well, by the way, well, anyway, I'm thinking we should rope one of them in. We've mentioned
Yes,
Steve
yes,
Thompson several
yes,
times,
yes.
but I'm
And
thinking we should rope some of them into coming on.
I I spoke to Christina, and she definitely would be interested too. So that would be, yes, we have some people who will
Ooh,
make this will be, that'll be a lot of fun.
that would be
Then
so much fun.
we'll have like 4 or 5
I
listeners.
know.
We're just like we're
Exactly.
exploding. We have information, now we have data to help support, to put on our, as part of our, as part
I'm
of
not saying we don't have data. I'm saying I've looked at our analytics, dude. That is calling that data is a stretch.
we're up 400%. Up 1000%. 400%. Jenna, we're up 400% in terms of our listeners. Yes, our listeners 400%. And
We're up
I'm
400%.
and I'm if I have to watch over their shoulders to make sure they're listening to the entire episode, I
Yeah, don't
will.
just click and then click off. You
No,
have to listen to the whole
no.
thing. Listen to us ramble and every
Yeah.
random psychotic thought in our head. You're going to listen to the whole thing.
The whole thing. This is
All
Jenna,
right.
done. I think it's wrap up time, huh?
Yes, I do think it's wrap up time. So, again, I want to say, right now you can follow us on SoundCloud. We are okay. I'm pretty sure a lot of what I've seen from the RSS feed situation is that they want us to have more than one episode before they'll pull the feed.
Okay.
So hopefully soon we'll be on other podcasting platforms, but right now
I
it's
just
just SoundCloud. And links will get posted on what Twitter and Threads and what can we put? No, we can post it on Instagram. We can do that actually, and then Facebook. I'll post on Facebook, whatever. Anyway, so there'll be links. You can also go to Laid Off and Looking at SoundCloud. Also, there's my Substack, which I think is like Substack slash Jenna Flanagan or something like that, or maybe Jenna Flanagan Substack. I don't remember, but I'll put the link in the show notes. Um, and oh, you can email us if you heard us say something wildly stupid or maybe dangerous when it comes to job searches. We have an email address, laidofandlookingpod@gmail.com. So you can email us there. And Dom, do you want to be in charge of checking the email?
Yes. And you know what?
Sweet.
I'm standing by with the analytics of our exploding podcast, our audience.
Oh, Lord.
600%.
600%. Whoa, six
Um,
people. I'm
I have
kidding.
I
I
have
have no
two
idea.
more people that are going to be listening. I've already talked to them, so watch out.
Okay, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else that I mean, subscribe obviously on subs no, not on Substack, sorry. Well, subscribe to my Substack, but also subscribe to us on SoundCloud until we get onto other platforms, then, please subscribe. Um they usually tell people leave a comment, but I'm not sure if that makes a difference on SoundCloud or not. I don't know.
Figuring
Anyway, engagement. That's all anything cares about is engagement. Do you have engagement or not?
out.
And if you don't, honestly, why are you even living? Okay, so I think that's that's the wrap.
Anyone's made it to
Um,
the end of this, thank you for listening to the whole show.
yes, what Dom said, 100%. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And next week, the plan, which could change, but the plan is to talk about what has become my other source of ire, and that is, are you kidding me, jobs? Um, I know there was a thing about being a predator, but I feel like some employers are taking it way too far. Like one person should not have 8 jobs.
And just to stress, Predator, if people are not part of our industry, Predator is a producer editor. So they
Which is
talk.
one thing. Producer editor is one thing. But again, I'm sorry, some people are taking it way too far.
Yes.
And that'll
So
be next week amongst many other things. We'll
thank you,
figure it out
everyone.
as we get there.
This is Dom.
This is
Say goodbye.
Jenna. Thank you so much, you guys, for listening.
Bye.
All right, bye.